Okay, something really interesting is happening in Texas right now. And something really interesting happened this week because my old boss, Barack Obama, who is quite selective about how he uses his time and his voice and where he campaigns and when, went down to Texas. It is May to campaign for James Tallarico, who's running for Senate, and also for Gina Hinojosa, who is running for governor there on the Democratic ticket. And this is fascinating because, again, the guy is super, super selective. He still remains the most popular person in the Democratic Party. But he went down there, did some retail politicking with these candidates, which was great. Now, what's interesting about this, the Democrats, I mean, this has been a white whale of sorts. The Texas has been for Democrats. They've wanted this state forever because it has a huge number of electoral votes in a presidential race. It means it wouldn't be so stressful to think about how on earth Democrats are going to keep winning Pennsylvania or try to win Pennsylvania again or try to win Ohio. And so this is a state where if they could win, if they could make inroads, and it's changing demographically a lot, it would be really huge moving forward. Not just in 2026, because James Tallarico winning a Senate seat would be a huge freaking deal on trying to win back the Senate, but also moving forward. But what's so interesting about Texas right now is that Tallarico, after a very competitive primary he had with Jasmine Crockett that concluded in March, he actually has pulled together a lot of the Democratic Party. About 80% of Democrats are now supporting him. And if you look at the Republican side, that primary went to a runoff. And that runoff election is not until next week on May 26th. And it has been an absolute dumpster fire already to date. But if you look at where Republicans are in that race, they have not coalesced around a candidate. We don't know who's going to win this primary. And that's also a problem for them because then they have to pull the party together before November, even to have the baseline of the Republican vote. So if you look at there was a poll last month by Texas Politics Forward, and it showed that only 62% of Republicans in Texas said they would vote for Paxton. Ken Paxton, that is. He is like the most corrupt person running for office in the country. He's the attorney general right now. The only 62% would vote for him in the general if he is the Republican candidate, 62%. But you know whose numbers are worse? John Cornyn, the sitting senator who Ken Paxton is running against in this primary, because only 60% of Republicans in Texas said they would vote for Cornyn in the general election if he is their party's candidate. Super interesting. And it's not just that, because for the last several months, while James Tallarico has had free reign out there, including having Obama campaign at a local taco joint, which is just great footage all around and they can reuse. The Republican side has been an absolute dumpster fire in general, but also on the air. And I just have to show you just a little sample of what some of the campaign ads have looked like.
Big hair, purple rain, the Macintosh, and a Reagan landslide. And that's when John Cornyn was first elected to office. And he's been attacking our values ever since.
Ken Paxton cheated on the mother of his children. This man used a burner phone and fake alias to hide his adultery. Divorced on biblical grounds, Paxton is now sleeping around with another married woman, a mother of 7.
Don't hold back there, boys. I mean, good Lord. First of all, what is that screaming to voters? John Cornyn is very old. He was elected a very, very long time ago. And Ken Paxton is an adulterer and has been cheating on his wife. So just don't hold back there at all. So that's Texas. Super interesting to watch. The primaries next week. It'll be fascinating who comes out of it. And then James Tallarico gets to run against that person. It is very much potentially winnable. And also Gina Hinojosa is within striking distance of Abbott, and not enough people talk about that. So that's another thing to watch. Okay. We're just going to move a little bit across the country to Nebraska, because this is also a really interesting dynamic happening here in this particular race. You have Pete Ricketts, who's the sitting senator. He got the seat when Ben Sasse essentially resigned back in 2023. Then he ran and he got elected the seat. But he is now up for re-election. And he is running against, well, Dan Osborne is who he's going to run against. But how we got here is super interesting because Dan Osborne is, of course, an independent. He's registered as an independent. He will likely caucus with the Democrats on a whole host of issues. So he would be considered a part of kind of a Democratic majority if he were to be elected. And maybe he could be the deciding seat. We will certainly see. Though remember, Nebraska is a state that Trump won by 20 points in 2024. Okay. So quite a red state. There's a little blue dot in Omaha, but quite a red state in general. And also Dan Osborne, he already ran in this race in 2024. He ran against Deb Fischer. He came within 7 points. So that's not really within the margin of error necessarily in most polls. However, again, Trump won by 20 points. He only lost to Deb Fischer by 7 points. And this is a much better year to be a challenger. The other thing about Dan Osborne is that Dan Osborne is a mechanic who is also a veteran of the Navy. And Pete Ricketts is, of course, from the very wealthy Ricketts family. So he's a very rich guy who thinks his taxes should be lower, running against a guy who's a mechanic and a veteran. Would rather be the bio of Dan Osborne than Pete Ricketts in that. Okay, but the interesting story is how we got here for it to be really a race between the two of them. Because this cycle, of course, Democrats knew Osborne would have the best chance of defeating Pete Ricketts. And meanwhile, Republicans were worried about Dan Osborne being the only person facing Pete Ricketts, meaning they wanted to divide the vote. They wanted to have somebody on the Democratic Party line nomination because Dan Osborne wasn't going to run on the Democratic Party line in the primary contest, who essentially, and this is what the theory is locally, would be a plant. So the theory is they put in a plant. And now this guy's name is William Forbes. I'm going to show you a picture of William Forbes just so you have a sense. And William Forbes claims he's not a plant. Republicans say he's not a plant. But this guy not only voted for Trump multiple times, he attended a training for Republican candidates in January, as in not that long ago. He's talked about returning America to a Christian view. He's used the term Dementia Joe to talk about Joe Biden. He's warned that Islamists can take us over in the country. Sounds like a lot of MAGA things to me, doesn't it? But he was running on the Democratic Party line in the primary contest. And Democrats were like, we can't have this guy. We can't have somebody who's going to stay in the race be nominated as a Democrat. So there's a woman named Cindy Burbank who they convinced to run in this race. And Cindy Burbank ran in this race. She entered the chat, I should say. And she promised if she won the primary, she would drop out and leave space for Dan Osborne. Okay? Guess what happened? She swept earlier this week. The primary was on Tuesday. She won 90% of the votes. And she recommitted to dropping out. She said, I don't want to split the ballot. I have no expectations of being able to win in November. So guess what that means? The Democrats maneuvered this whole thing. And Cindy Burbank defeated the Republican plant William Forbes in the Democratic primary, and she's going to drop out, which means Dan Osborne is going to run against Pete Ricketts. Again, mechanic who's a veteran against a very wealthy guy who thinks he should pay less taxes. Now, if you think Republicans are not worried, they're not worried. They're going to say they're not worried because Trump won this state by 20 points. Well, they seem worried because the Secretary of State, who also just lost his reelection, which there's a certain irony there, is now trying to make it harder, challenge Cindy Burbank trying to get her name off the ballot so that it would just be Osborne and Ricketts. That tells you how fearful they are. We don't even know. We don't know what's going to happen there, but very interesting mechanics. If you don't think Democrats are fighting, they're certainly fighting up front. They're fighting behind the scenes. That's sort of a complicated situation, but it felt interesting to talk about. Okay. We always like to have a nominee for the most clown car-ish member of the cabinet. It's a deep competition, and this week it was a really deep competition because we had Kash Patel seemingly self-combusting when he was asked about his personal bourbon line that he had been manufacturing and giving out from the FBI, as one does, only he does. We had Pete Hegseth testifying multiple times, which is always fodder for the biggest member of the clown car. But guess what? Doug Burgum, he of the best hair in the cabinet, I will give him that, is the winner this week. And you know why? Because he testified this week and he was just grilled on his job. He was grilled about things like contracts for, say, the reflecting pool. He was grilled on a lot of things, right? And this guy, one of my favorite clips is when he was grilled by Democratic Congressman Jared Huffman, who made him look like a complete fool when he was arguing that fossil fuels are better than solar power. So I'm just going to play this clip for you. It speaks for itself.
All of these projects you're describing in Nevada have one thing in common. When the sun goes down, they produce zero electricity.
Enter into the record this amazing new technology that apparently the secretary is unaware of. It's a battery.
I appreciate he has a battery with him. You would love a prop in these hearings. There's more where that came from, but Doug Burgum, man, didn't have the best day, and so he wins Clown Car Member of the Week this week. Okay, speaking of, I guess we could call it energy, or people behaving poorly, performing poorly. I don't know what you call it. You can be the judge for yourself. Republican Representative Virginia Foxx. Okay, maybe you've heard her name, maybe you haven't heard her name. This is such a crazy thing she did. I just have to talk about it because she got is 10-year-old kid in her district, 10-year-old boy named Christian, sent her a letter, and the letter was basically about how electric cars and why the government should consider tax rebates, giving tax rebates to people who drive who purchase electric vehicles. Okay. He's 10. Good for him for writing his member of Congress. Doesn't matter what political party you are. That's part of what members of Congress do. They write letters back to their constituents. It's part of democracy. Well, her written response to this student was so off the chain and unhinged. Again, a 10-year-old kid. It was so telling about it. But she basically took the opportunity to respond to this kid by trying to make points about climate change and the national debt. And I'm just going to read you an excerpt. You can see it right there on the screen. It's available online. I'm just going to read you an excerpt from her letter, again, to a 10-year-old. You and your classmates will be responsible for paying down the national debt. Please ask your teacher to explain propaganda to you. While I will never be able to know, my guess is that your teachers will not give you a good educational experience and help you learn to think as they are too interested in indoctrinating you. How sad. Virginia Foxx was possessed by Trump, possessed by who knows what. Again, she's 8 times this kid's age. I will say to Christian, there are way better members of both parties out there in Congress who would be much more receptive to your ideas, which are better than most people or a lot of people in this town who are twice your age, if not more. Virginia Foxx is 8 times. So there's that. I just want to leave you with something that made me laugh this week, made me smile. And we always need that in our lives, don't we? Because you probably remember, I think we talked about this, King Charles, when he was here, he completely trolled Trump in his speech. It was masterful what he did. But still, King Charles is still the head of the monarchy, and he's quite buttoned up. So he had this interaction with Rod Stewart this week that if you didn't see, you just have to see.
May I say well done in the Americans? You were superb. Absolutely superb. Put that little black bag in his place.
In case you couldn't hear it, he said, you put that little rat bag in his place. Talking about Trump, of course. As the kids say, yes, King.